Hi there, thank you for joining me for another Dear Sam Help Horsemanship Series. This week I wanted to talk about something that I hear people discuss a lot or reach out and asking for help with, and it's talking about the horse that quits. Whether it's you're walking the horse down the barn aisle and you only have a few more feet to go to get to the tying area or the cross ties or wherever, the wash rack, and the horse stops dead in their tracks. Whether it's you're riding out and the horse immediately stops at a certain space, maybe in the same space consistently. Maybe you're enjoying a trail ride and then suddenly it feels like out of nowhere that the horse just stops and won't go forward. There's a variety of scenarios that I often hear about horses that are just quitting. And for most people reaching out, they have been taken by surprise by what the horse is doing. So something that I wanted to bring up in this is, of course, most of the time, by the time the human is realizing what is happening, it is much too late, because for a majority of the interaction, for many people, unfortunately, with life's distractions, with life stresses, with time issues or urgencies, or maybe daylight limitations, there is often this kind of gentle mental chaos that many people bring when they're interacting with their horse. And when this happens, in the human's mind, they are much farther ahead than where they are actually physically at with the horse, which means they are often missing the horse's initial, reasonable, subtle communication that might be reflecting whether they are avoidant, whether maybe they are defensive, maybe the horse is not feeling particularly confident about something, and the human is kind of mentally ahead, and so they're just using a lot of energy with their seat, their leg, their hand, whatever it is, whether they're on the ground or in the saddle, to try and gently drive that horse through an area, because maybe they've been there before, maybe they've been there multiple times, maybe to the human it doesn't seem like a big deal moment. But what they don't realize is they are consistently adding pressure to a horse that is reflecting a level of insecurity. And the more pressure that the human is responding with when the horse is reasonably displaying that he needs things broken down in smaller, more specific segments, the more the human is unintentionally teaching the horse to be defensive towards their communication. And so what happens is you basically think of it as the horse is asking for help, you haven't answered, you've kind of given the come on, you're fine, let's keep going, and you're teaching the horse to not trust you. You're teaching the horse to become anticipative, because he now has to, we'll say, protect himself or take care of himself when he's feeling concerned. And for most horses, when they are concerned, they have two options. They can either flee and run away, or they can stop and shut down and not move at all. And this is where so much of the time, again, in coming back to the human's focus, whether we're talking with our friends, whether it's social hour, whether we're riding by ourselves but we're mentally distracted by other things going on in our life, or things we're going to do after the ride, or whatever it may be, we are not there present. And when we're missing that communication, like I said, we're unintentionally teaching the horse to be defensive or avoidant, or maybe even anticipate, and then it increases his level of fear earlier in the ride, and then eventually we get a horse that learns to quit and stop. And by the time the horse has come to that conclusion of stopping, he's already gone through a long list of questions that we have missed. And this is one of those things that, again, initially, maybe the first few times he stops, it might seem like you can sort of talk him out of it. If you're leading him, maybe you have to walk the diagonal, a little left, a little right, and then he seems to come forward again. If you're riding, maybe it seems like just, bumping him with your leg a few times, and then he goes forward. But what you're going to start to find is that every time he's stopping faster, harder, and stronger, and more committed to that stopping state. And when he's physically stopped, he's mentally shutting down. It is a way of protecting himself to not keep going into a place that's causing, like I said, potential fear or concern or otherwise. So if you find yourself with a horse that suddenly is taking you by surprise and stopping abruptly, or even just in a mild manner, and doesn't seem like you can get him to go forward at all, you need to know stopping is not the issue. Stopping is a consequence of all of the subtle ways that horse was asking for help, that you ignored his communication, you missed the communication, you didn't address his communication in a way that had value to him. So many times people will say, oh, look, you shouldn't be scared of this, we've been here many times, keep going. That has no value to the horse, to just drive him on through. You are teaching him nothing, you are not building his confidence, and you certainly are not building his trust towards you and how you're going to help him in these scenarios. And so you're teaching the horse to take over sooner and faster and stronger. So the more you can first be mentally present at all times during the interaction. It is not social hour, despite what your good intentions are, whether you're at the barn and just trying to catch up with a friend, whether you want to ride out with a friend. I find so many people cannot, when I teach, and they need to be mentally present step by step, they cannot talk and ride at the same time. And I always ask, so how much energy and how much focus did it take to ride every single step to be supportive of your horse? And they say, oh my gosh, it took so much, I didn't realize. Okay, so how much of that can you offer your horse if you always have your head cranked over your shoulder and gossiping about the latest whatever, or talking about things that are concerning you, or venting about work, or whatever it is that you might be doing? How mentally present are you there for your horse and able to recognize his communication, address his communication in a way that has value to him, and actually build his confidence and trust to work through something, versus trying to shut down his resistance and forcibly go for obedience from him in order for him to comply. So something to think about. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you for joining me.